This looks scary, but it's basically just a vocabulary question. They're just asking you, like, do you understand what this term means? So let's just go through it and I'll highlight what I think is important. To estimate the proportion of a population that has a certain characteristic, a random sample was selected from the population. So nothing really matters there. This is just kind of baseline statistics. If we have a random sample, that means we're just doing good math. We're doing good statistics. We're asking the right people. We have an unbiased survey. So far, this is just kind of setting the table that, like, this is a normal, good situation. Next sentence. Based on the sample, it is estimated that the proportion of the population that has the characteristic is 0.49 with an associated margin of error of 0.04. Okay, so that matters, and margin of error definitely is the vocab that we're going to need to be thinking about here. Based on this estimate and margin of error, which of the following is the most appropriate conclusion about the proportion of the population that has the characteristic? Well, you can look at the choices and start to figure this out, but even without it, I kind of know where they're going here. Basically, what a margin of error means is we have a survey. We did a great job of setting it up right and making sure it's a random sample and doing all our math right, but even still, there is this idea in statistics that it's very difficult to be perfectly accurate. It's just the way statistics go, right? If you're doing a survey, you're not asking every single person in the world the question. So you're always kind of limiting your group and maybe picking like slightly the wrong people. And so margin of error is a way of measuring kind of like, well, if you're not perfect, how close to perfect could you be, right? What's likely to happen based on your survey in the real world? So when we think of this, we usually think of it, you might see this as something like 0.49 plus or minus 0.04. And that just means that on either end, we could be off by 0.04. So we can add it and subtract it. So our actual range here is if we subtracted it, we'd have 0.45. And if we added it, we'd have 0.53. So it's still most likely that 0.49 is kind of like the right answer if we asked everybody in the world, if they have this characteristic. But statistically, we'd still be really, really good if we were in this range of 0.45 to 0.53. It's just very likely that that's going to be the actual answer. Even if we're not perfectly right on the 0.49, we're still right on the range. So let's see if there's an answer that matches with that. Choice A, it is plausible that the proportion is between 0.45 and 0.53. Yes, that's pretty much exactly what I said. If you have any issue with the word plausible, that just means something like possible. Or, this is maybe a little stretch, but likely or reasonable, right? It's a reasonable thing because that range is a little bit wider and includes that potential for error. Let's look at the other choices though, just to kind of, see. It is plausible that the proportion is less than 0.45. Well, I mean, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely because a margin of error is not capturing every single possible mistake, but it is giving us a very wide range that statistically speaking is much more likely than the stuff outside of the range to be accurate. So this isn't necessarily impossible, but it's much less likely than choice A. C, the proportion is exactly 0.49. Well, anytime in statistics we start talking about exact numbers, we've got a problem. Very rarely do we have the ability to say with certainty what's going to happen. The point of a survey is to get an estimate, and the point of a margin of error is to kind of widen that estimate to be as accurate as possible. But it's very, very difficult to be perfectly accurate. So this choice is a big red flag. D, it is plausible that the proportion is greater than 0.53. Well, that's really just the same problem as B, but in the other direction. So again, it's possible, but it's unlikely. So A is basically just a straight up definition of margin of error. Just be comfortable with what this means, and these should be very easy questions. Even if they look at first like they're scary, it's really just a vocabulary question asking for the definition of margin of error.